Hello,
Hello, everybody.
everybody. I told Will to wait
How's it
early.
going?
Good, everybody. Welcome to Cinephilia, your weekly dose of news, fun things, and sometimes social commentary. Today, maybe it's a social commentary.
Just a little
That's
bit.
a little bit.
Maybe just a little
A
bit.
little bit. I mean, it goes with the topic of our show today, which is representation in animation, which is relevant to what some of the stuff is going on today, and also relevant general in life.
Yeah, it's funny that we actually planned to do this episode already. Like you guys know, we were going to do this a while back, and we pushed it back because of other things that were going on. And then we decided to bring it back because it was a nice segue in from last week's Spark Shorts
Yeah.
episode. And then news erupted and current events erupted in the world, and it's kind of relevant. So it fell into a nice spot.
Sorry, I'm fixing my
Frontline
camera.
asks, do we build roller coasters in the stream? No,
No.
not this one.
Not this one.
That was the last one.
I totally screwed up my camera. Sorry. No, I got it. Whatever.
What's happening?
Close enough. I was fixing my camera. Yeah. So let's you want to just jump into the news?
Sure. What news items do you have this week?
I have an intro screen first to play. There we go. Whoa, hold your horses, Will. So okay, I have some interesting, fun entertainment news. One of the news that I just found out is that The Simpsons is back to its proper 4:3 format on Disney Plus. So when The Simpsons came over to Disney Plus, Disney did the stupid thing and cropped all the episodes to fit the 16:9 ratio, which is fine sometimes. It doesn't make that much difference, but The Simpsons has so many visual gags and so many details in the backgrounds of everything that they did, especially in like the great middle area where it was fantastic, that a bunch of stuff got cut off, and people are so upset, which is weird because when The Simpsons first went to FX, they did the exact same thing, and a lot of people were pissed. So it's not like they didn't know people were gonna hate this, and so
Right.
so they put it back to the 4:3 ratio, which is fine. It's just
I think that they just, when they were getting things ready for Disney Plus, they were probably just speeding through a lot of stuff.
yeah,
And not
nobody
even
thought about it.
taking things into account. So I don't think they even realized what they were doing when they did it, when they started chopping up the sides and the top of the screens.
Yeah, so that's nice because that's one of those shows that definitely needs to just be in its original thing.
Right. So now I feel like I can actually watch it again. I was avoiding watching anything Simpsons on there because I didn't want to follow that. Do you have any? All of my news is related to what's going on in the world. So
You might get rid of the fun
things
ones
that you want to do before that.
Savage Stalker says we build roller coasters of emotions in this one.
That's exactly
true. Okay,
exactly what this is.
do you guys remember a couple of weeks ago when I said I was just a little Star Wars fatigued. I was a little tired of Star Wars news. I take it back for this week. There are rumors. We love Star Wars rumors that Admiral Thrawn is getting some live action treatment. We do not know how, or in with his show in a movie, whatever. We don't know. But the rumors around is that Admiral Thrawn is coming to live action, which is really exciting because Admiral Thrawn is one of the actually. Oh, I thought you froze for a second. You were just reading the chat. Yes, I thought your videos froze.
I'm just listening and also reading the chat at the same time.
Yeah, Admiral Thrawn is such a cool character. It's one of the best characters that Disney Star Wars has, and I'm really excited to see him in something live action. He was in like expanded universe stuff, and then he was erased from Star Wars when Disney pushed out the expanded universe. But then was very quickly brought back because he's a really good character, and now he's got some books. He was in Rebels, so now he might get some live action treatment, which is really cool. I'm really excited for it.
They haven't announced who is in the running to play him.
Not at all. No.
Do you have a speculative cast? Like who do you think would be good in the role, if anyone?
I don't know. I would almost love to see the guy. I don't know what the guy who does his voice on the cartoon looks like, but he was so good that I don't know. Yeah, Timothy Zahn should have a say in it. He's the guy who created the character and wrote the books for him, and still writes stuff. So So yeah, so that's exciting. That was my news topics for the week.
I just remembered that I do have a news thing that is not related to the bigger things happening in the world. Well, kind of it is. So because of the pandemic, a lot of things have moved online, so that you don't have to, be out and social and in person with people. And YouTube has started a online film festival that's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
I believe 10 days of them just streaming films that usually were going to be available at film festivals this year, since they're not getting to stream or display there at the festivals, they're on YouTube. So if you search YouTube for We Are One, a global film festival, they've got I think it's 10 days of content, and I think it's on day 5 now. So it's been going for a couple of days already. But there's like they've got movies that were going to be at BFI, Sundance, Tribeca, all sorts of different film festivals from around the world.
Yep.
And it's, live action, feature length, short, animation. There's a whole bunch of stuff. So go check that out and see if there's anything that you want to watch. Thanks to YouTube.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
That's cool. The other movie news is obviously there are protests going on right now. And a lot of media outlets are responding to protests and kind of showing support for the Black and brown people who are protesting because of all of the police injustice that's happening, police brutality. And I wanted to bring up some of those. Dang it. Don't you hate it when you have like your social media up and then it just refreshes and you have to find stuff all over again? I wanted to bring up some of the responses that that Hollywood and different media outlets are saying in response to these protests, because it's relevant to what this show is. So yeah, Netflix has tweeted, "To be silent is to be complicit. Black Lives Matter." A lot of these companies are taking that approach where they're saying they don't want to be complicit anymore. They don't want to be silent, and they're tweeting Black Lives Matter and also tweeting the point of wanting to stand specifically by their Black employees and clients and customers and creators, because a lot of these outlets obviously have Black content. And I think that that's important. I wish that a lot of them were taking a step forward and saying not just that Black Lives Matter, but also what specifically is happening right now. What they're not addressing the specific act of police brutality that has brought all of this up. And I wish that they would also add that to their statement.
Yep. But be less broad about what they're saying.
Yes. But I do like that we have this, I guess it's a trend of these media outlets that are at least showing support in one way or another. The thing about the statements, though, is that a statement is a statement. We get statements all the time.
Yeah.
And now we have to start putting things into action. Yeah. So, like, for example, A24, who you guys know I love, put out a statement that goes a little more in depth into the situation at hand. And so they're saying specifically they stand by their Black employees and Black creators, and they talk about how Black stories specifically for them have been influential for that company to grow. Mm-hmm. Like, they put out Moonlight. Moonlight was a big deal for them. Mm-hmm. But they also do bring up the names of people who have died, like George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor. But what I love most about A24's statement is that, I don't even want to paraphrase, I'm going to read directly. It says, Black voices and stories have been instrumental in the growth of A24. We will continue to amplify those voices and tell those stories. But from this moment, we will also be taking action to show how much we value Black lives. We will have more to share this week. I don't know what exactly that's going to be, but know that we are listening and thinking and working. So I don't know if that means they're maybe going to work on hiring more Black people or making sure that that more Black people are in leadership positions and creating their films or what. But I think that it's time for, like, statements are great, but I think it's time to actually put action behind those statements.
I mean,
so I just wanted to bring awareness to that.
I mean, it is a small step for them to, kind of speak out, because they do companies like that tend to kind of back away from any heavy opinions because they're afraid of losing the business. So it is a good step forward. It is a good thing to hear from them. But yeah, like you said, definitely. Now don't stop there. Keep going.
Right.
keep going.
And I don't want a statement like Disney saying we have gay representation and then put LeFou as the gay character who is only kind of hinted at being gay. Yeah. Like, not that kind of action. We need actual action that
we're... So Rita Cooper was saying that apparently Xbox didn't put out their own statement. They just retweeted PlayStation's statement.
Oh, no. That's not good.
Well, somebody in their social media needs to maybe get a refresher on how to social media properly.
That's stupid. But I mean, other companies, I only actually read from Netflix and A24, but like Hulu has put out something, HBO has put out something.
Sesame
and
Street,
by the way, it's been a rough week, but let me tell you, HBO Max has been a light in my week. HBO Max debuted, and I've loved everything that I've watched on it so far.
I think it's the first streaming platform in a while that I walked in and I was like, this is pretty good. There's a lot of good stuff here.
So I have to say, I've got a couple of recommendations for you guys later, but I'm going to jump to one of them since HBO Max has come up. Definitely watch Legendary on HBO Max, which is the new voguing ballroom reality competition show. And it is awesome.
Is it good?
It is lovely. I mean, it's obviously polished and it's got a lot of money behind it. It's got a huge set and it's got celebrities, but it's very, as far as the competition goes, it's very much authentic to the ballroom Vogue scene, which I love to see. One of the judges is actually one of my favorite Voguers of all time, Leomi. So I love that she's there representing the actual voices of the ballroom scene. And she's, obviously instructing other judges how to judge on these categories. But it's great. If you know anything about the ballroom or Vogue scene, or if you're interested in learning about Vogue, definitely watch it. I'm loving it.
Rita Cooper says, Legendary is so good.
It is so good. I got so hyped watching it. And they put out 2 episodes this week, and I watched both of them.
He says he loved every moment of it. I need to watch that. I was a little concerned. I was like, because I watched a little bit, like, is this going to be like good, or is it going to be like... I was a little afraid that it was going to be like mishandled a little bit.
There was some skepticism from me going in, just like when Ryan Murphy decided to do Pose. I was like, oh, how is this going to turn out? But I feel like they... it's not appropriative. Like they definitely reach out to the community to figure out how to do a show based on, this history and this atmosphere.
Yeah.
And all of the houses that are part of the competition are actual houses that existed before the show. They didn't create houses for this. So they just have their representatives from the houses going in to do these competitions.
Which is good, because
which is really great. So it's a lot of fun.
So a few people have had issues signing in just because it switched over, which I did too. And I actually had an issue back a little while ago. If you're on AT&T and you had HBO through them, to log in to HBO Max, if I remember, oh, you know what? Nope, it changed. Never mind. I was going to give you wrong information. I had issues too. Like I had to I couldn't log into my AT&T account. I had to redo my passwords, and I was able to finally log in, but it took a little bit. They didn't really explain how to carry over your account, so you kind of had to find it on your own.
Yeah, there was a lot of confusion. I mean, obviously, we talked about the confusion leading up to this because there was HBO Go and HBO Now that kind of merged into HBO Max. So I think a lot of the confusion and HBO just not having a this is exactly what's happening info list or whatever out there for people to share and read, um, kind of maybe hurt them in the opening of this. I know that HBO Max also didn't have apps on certain services like Fire Stick or Roku. Like day of HBO Max's launch, they didn't have apps available on those. So that's not good. But hopefully that gets remedied.
And so did HBO Now and go away? Are they gone?
So this is what happened with because I was accessing HBO through my Apple TV and my PlayStation. On Apple TV, I had both or HBO Now and HBO Go, but I only ever use HBO Now. I have an older Apple TV, so when I went to look for HBO Max after the Max launch, I noticed that there was no HBO whatsoever on my Apple TV. I think that they updated those apps, and HBO Now and HBO Go went away. And because my Apple TV is older, it doesn't have
you can't use
any
Max.
of the newer stuff. So they probably added HBO Max to Apple TV, and my one just didn't get updated with it because it's older. On PlayStation, I also had HBO Now and HBO Go there, and only used HBO Now. I noticed that the HBO Now app automatically on its own updated to be HBO Max, but HBO Go is just sitting there like not it doesn't touched. Do anything. It just sits there. So I think that it's been like a big confusion on HBO's end.
They just needed to post something, say HBO Now is now HBO Max, and so we go, oh, now it's the same, we're just getting a new app, because it sounded like they were adding another service. And you're like, oh, it's another, because initially that's what I thought, because it said all kinds of original programming. I was like, oh, so HBO Now is going to be where their movies and stuff is, but their original programming is going to HBO Max, and it was a lot of confusion. But it's great. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, if you figure out how to access your HBO Max, you will enjoy it.
I'm enjoying it because I get it for free, so that's a bonus. Cool.
Yeah, HBO Max was definitely a highlight of the week for me.
So what's next? What do you got on the news?
I think that's it for news for me.
Oh, okay. I thought you had a lot more. Let's go back.
It was just those items.
Cool. Let's go back to our main topic. Representation.
Bush Camper asks, is Cinemax app going to be called Max?
Peter Cooper says, we finally got to do trailers. We can't do trailers just yet. At least for right now, until we get back to the studio.
Trailers are axed because of isolation and quarantine and the way we have to do the show now. Hopefully they'll be back soon.
It's a tech limitation just because I can't show them to Will at the same time. But yeah, we'll so slowly bring it back, and hopefully we'll be back at the studio, so we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
At some point soon. Ish.
There is, I don't know if I saw not rumors. I saw what I thought was them saying that this new teaser trailer was out today, but then I couldn't find the actual teaser trailer. But it's relevant to the topic at hand. There's a new movie called now I can't think of it. I've got too many news things around here. Too many screens open, and I can't figure out which screen it's on. We'll come back to it. So, the topic for today, we're actually talking about representation in animation. And this topic actually came to me quite a while ago, a few weeks ago, because of I was just thinking about Pixar's Soul coming out soon, and how I'm excited that we're getting a Black-led Pixar movie, but at the same time, I'm kind of worried that it's falling into this trope that we've been getting of having Black-led animated movies where the Black character is shown to be something other than Black for a lot of the movie.
Yeah.
Sort of like with Princess and the Frog, where she's a frog for a lot of the movie, or gosh, what is the other one? I'm sorry. If I seem scatterbrained today, it's because there's obviously had a lot of things going on in the world, and there's a lot going on in my head.
Reach Cooper says that Will Smith movie.
Yes, that's the one. That's why I couldn't think of it because I still haven't actually seen it.
Which one is that?
But it's the one with Will Smith and Spies in Disguise, where Will Smith is turned into a pigeon for most of the movie.
Yeah.
Tom Holland has this special, and so we get to see Tom Holland after he changes Will Smith's character into a pigeon. We see Tom Holland in all his whiteness for the whole movie, training this pigeon how to be a pigeon. So it's kind of a weird thing. But it seems to be like a trope or like a trend that's starting to happen, and I don't want that to be the case.
With this Pixar movie,
what's that?
With this Pixar movie,
right?
Yeah.
So I thought that we could spend an episode talking about the different representation in animation. Doesn't just have to be Black people, but just talking about how we see diversity and get diversity in animation, how it works and how it doesn't, because sometimes it doesn't work. Just thought it'd be an interesting topic to talk about.
Reach Cooper says, I don't know if I can talk about Soul yet, as we don't know enough about it yet. Yeah, there's very, very little. We've gotten a teaser and then a trailer.
Yeah, that's very true. And I agree. I can't really talk about Soul. I'm just going by the trailer and what happens in the trailer. So hopefully it'd be great if the character doesn't spend the entire movie as a little soul trying to figure out where he belongs. And we get to see him in all of his Blackness.
Yeah.
But I'm just hesitantly worried that could be the case.
Yeah. Or if he is going to be a soul for the whole movie, that we get to spend time with his family, dealing with him.
Yeah, that could be interesting too. There are definitely different ways of showing, including people in your stories without, like I said, I'm scatterbrained today.
Without like,
this is gonna be a weird episode.
Without hiding who like they are in general, it would just allow them to be. Yeah.
I think that because we're getting great movies. I think animation is finally hitting a point where we are getting movies that are blatantly about race and culture and don't shy away from it. Specifically with Coco and with Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. We're now getting movies that really put it at the forefront and make it about those characters and don't shy away from showing those characters in all of their greatness. But it took kind of a while to get to that point where even a lot of the older animated movies that deal with different cultures kind of do it in stereotypical ways.
Yeah.
So for example, Aladdin, which is very much a Middle Eastern story with Middle Eastern characters. Even still with that kind of representation, Jasmine is one of my favorite Disney princesses because of her personality and attitude and how she kind of stands up in a man's world, which I think is great. But Aladdin, as hot as he is kind of an odd design for that movie. Aladdin very much just looks like Prince Eric from The Little Mermaid with a little bit darker skin.
Like a little bit darker skin.
Just a little bit darker. And if you look at some of the marketing stuff that has come out since Aladdin has come out, his skin has gotten even lighter in marketing. But he doesn't really embody a lot of the features of Middle Eastern people. Whereas, on the other hand, the villain, Jafar, is a straight up caricature of those features, and it's kind of like a little too much. And I say that Jafar is a character that I love, and I do actually think that his place in the movie is great. Like he's a villain through and through, and that's the purpose that he serves in the movie. But the fact that you have a hero in a movie about people of color who is a little lighter skinned and a little more streamlined or like stylized in a more American way, and have a villain that's just the opposite of that is a little problematic.
Yeah.
Aladdin's a great movie. That's just the thing about the movies that we're going to be talking about today is that on their own, if these movies existed in a world where we got a lot of representation, then on their own, these movies wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
But since these movies is the only representation we get oftentimes of these different cultures, then that's the go-to point that people have.
Yeah.
And people have to realize that that's not all that this culture is.
Yeah. Yeah, like at face value, at immediacy, they're not particularly problematic.
Right.
But then you sit and think about it for a second, you're like, it's slightly problematic that these things are being represented properly.
Mitchie says Aladdin is a big smush of different cultures. That was the whole debate over Naomi Scott's casting. Yes, that's another thing that is very odd about the representation of non-white people in a lot of film and non-white culture, is that a lot of times instead of actually presenting a culture that exists, a culture is created. So like Agrabah is not an actual place, and they don't actually say in Aladdin what specific type of people these are. We just know, we gather that they're some sort of Middle Eastern, Arab, or something along those lines because of the setting and because of the styling of the movie. But it's a little weird that I mean, I understand it, especially in fairy tale movies, we create places, and that also allows for you to not be held down by real life situations that are going on or actual problems. But I think that at the same time, it creates a whole lot of other problems that you're not dealing with when you do that. Kind of the same thing with The Princess and the Frog, where Disney was making a big deal about having its first African-American princess. I mean, that was a big push for that movie. That was part of the marketing. But if you actually think about it, America doesn't have a royal hierarchy like that. So in order for there to be an African-American princess, she has to marry into a royal hierarchy from another country, right?
Yeah.
It's weird to me that they did not let Prince Naveen just be like an African prince. Therefore, really getting her into being a African American princess. Instead, they created a place called Maldonia and had this character, Prince Naveen, who is darker skinned.
He's just generic brown dude.
Just generic brown dude come in and not actually represent
anybody.
It's a very, I mean, that's something that I noticed the first time I watched it. I was like, this is kind of weird. I love that we're getting Black princess and an African American princess, but this is kind of a weird way to do it.
And it was weird because like he wasn't even like you say, oh, he's based on this culture. They just didn't want to name the country, or you know what I mean? He was very much just generic brown person.
Just generic.
He was
brown.
not even from a continent. There's nowhere. He had a little bit of an accent. You were like, okay, he's foreign. But
he had an accent, but also his accent was completely made up.
Made up, yeah.
He was using words that were completely made up. Like he yells Ashidanza all the time, and it's a completely made up word. It's not from anyone's language. So they're creating. And if you're going to create like that, I think the problem that arises when you create a place or a culture like that, the problem that arises is that when you create something like that, you have to actually world build to actually make it,
give
it some substance,
Mm-hmm.
where they're not like creating Agrabah or creating Macedonia or wherever that country is. They aren't doing enough world building to actually let us know who these people are and what is happening.
Especially
like,
when
where they come from, what their culture is.
Especially when Tiana is from a real place. She lives in New Orleans. It's a real American place. It's not some made up country. She's from a real place. He should have been from a real place as well.
The other thing that really makes Naveen's existence weird to me is that
Manly Mutt says hi.
Manly Mutt says hi, Dave. Dave says hi. The other thing that really makes Naveen's existence weird to me is that Disney, as a animation studio, before The Princess and the Frog, had already had 2 full feature-length feature films that were set in Africa and did not feature any Black people. So we have both The Lion King and Tarzan that are both set in Africa and do not feature any Black people whatsoever. No authentic Africans at all. Even half of the cast, I would say maybe even a majority of the cast of The Lion King voice actors were not even Black. And that's something that they tried to do better with in the live action Lion King remake, and that they actually did cast a lot of Black people for those roles, which is great. I wish the movie
I was going to say too bad the movie was terrible.
But if you look at the actual cast of the original Lion King, we get James Earl Jones, we get Whoopi Goldberg, and I can't think of her name, but the voice actress who did Sarabi, I believe, is Black. And then I can't remember the who it was that voiced Nala. I can't remember if she was Black or not, but just about everyone else who voiced Nala.
Oh, okay. In the new one or the old one?
In the original.
Oh, in the original. Yeah, I don't know either.
I can't remember who voiced her, so I can't remember whether she was Black or not. But other than that, all of the major players are white actors. And it's even interesting that the villain in that is a British actor, which, you know, then ties a lot into colonialism. I mean, it's not something that I'm sure they were thinking about when they made the movie, but to have a British villain in an African story very much is going to read that way to some people. It's all very interesting.
What Minchie says, I thought Will said Tiger King for a moment, and I was trying to remember if Oklahoma was a foreign country. Harlanda says, I thought it is. And Minchie said, pretty much is. And Kara said, I took Naveen as being Iberian, so brown but still European. Yeah, but even, like, kinda. But even then, that's what we're talking about. It's they kind of left it up to you in your imagination. They didn't actually give it to you. And they should have just specific. Amber has something to say. She's waving at me.
Amber, talk.
Inspired by the Maldives and Macedonia.
Oh, Amber says that the Maldonia is inspired by the Maldives and Macedonia.
So there we go.
They could have just picked the place.
They could have just picked a place.
I'm letting you know that's the area.
Amber coming in with her Disney knowledge.
Thank you, Wikipedia.
What else did she say?
She said, "Thank you, Wikipedia."
Oh. The good thing about The Princess and the Frog, one of the things I actually love, because I don't want this to be an episode just about like how horrible representation in animation is, because we do get lots of great things out of it.
Yeah.
It's not like, you know, there are good things about all of these movies. Obviously, The Lion King, just the fact of it being in Africa and seeing the Serengeti and getting lots of like African beats is great. I mean, it's also kind of weird that they did an African movie and decided Elton John is the guy for this music. But those songs are great.
Yeah, it was good music, but
right. And you know, Elton John also did the music for Disney's Aida, which is another great story that actually is set in Africa. And deals with an African princess. And there was actually talk, I've seen designs for the Aida animated feature film that Disney was working on to translate that into an animated story. I don't know why it never happened, because the designs for it looked amazing. But for some reason, they were like, we're going to do these 2 African stories that don't feature Black people, but this one is we're going to put on a back burner and not worry about it. But something good that did come out of The Princess and the Frog was that it did not fall into the trope of colorism. If you don't know what colorism is, like a quick explanation is it's basically a type of prejudice and discrimination based on the social or cultural meanings attached to the shade of skin color. So, like with Aladdin, how the hero's skin color, even though they're both of Agrabah descent, whatever that means, even though they're both brown, the hero's skin is a little lighter, so you can kind of trust him more.
Yeah.
Where the villain is a little darker. That would be colorism.
Yeah.
One thing that I loved immediately watching The Princess and the Frog is that Tiana's skin color is darker than the villains, Dr. Facilier's. Dr. Facilier is a lighter skinned Black guy standing next to Tiana.
Yeah.
And usually when we see darker Black people or especially darker Black women, they're shown to be they're put into roles that are negative stereotypes. So it was nice to see a darker skinned Black woman as the lead in that film. So there are pros and cons to all of these things.
Yeah.
Everything is complex. Nothing is just yes or no.
Yeah. Reedish Cooper says, I would like to talk about when they do get it right, or at least possibly right, such as The Proud Family. Or are we only focusing on film?
No, we can talk about television too. And I agree that television often does get it right more than film. And I think it's because they know that I don't know, companies that work in both television and film don't put as much I don't want to say focus, because they do focus on it. They don't put as much worry into creating for television.
So television is much cheaper to produce than generally than feature films are. So people who are at the top, who are nervous about these things, that whether or not they want to risk because they might alienate people for whatever reason, they're more likely to give more pushback in something like feature films as opposed to television, where it's not as it's not one project that is gonna lose or win a lot of money, as opposed to television, where it kind of gets spread out.
So television has a much better history of getting it right than film does. Like you said, Proud Family, Static Shock, which was a great animated show. Disney finally, was pushing this in the midst of their princess thing, when they were like pushing the princess really hard. They were finally like, we've got our first Latina princess. And everyone thought it was going to be a movie, and then it turned out that it was a show. Which was also a great show. It was a spinoff from Sophia the First.
Yeah.
And it's great that all of that stuff exists. So yeah, television definitely gets a better quicker than film does. I feel like film has all of these stepping stones that the industry has to get through, and no one wants to take the first step because they're all nervous about it. So it usually has to come from like independent film or independent creators who may, somehow get the chance to work on a mainstream film, to actually put those stepping stones into place. Or it comes from marketing. If television shows are doing well enough that the film industry sees that they can make money off of these types of characters, then they will push harder. Like I feel like The Princess and the Frog came about mainly because Disney wanted to get back into doing princess movies, because they had taken a long break from doing princess movies. but they saw that they needed to have a different kind of princess. They needed to fill a different kind of void in their princess marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think Princess and the Frog actually came from.
Yeah.
Is that they were actively thinking about, who's not being represented.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great. We need more thinking like that to get more work, more diverse work out there.
Regis Cooper asks, is Miles Morales the first black male lead in an animated film?
No, not in an animated film. Probably in an animated film as big as it was. There was Bebe's Kids, which I don't know if any of you remember that movie. But that was definitely a movie with a black animated lead.
An old boss of mine worked on Baby's Kids.
Really?
Yeah, he told the story how at some point they were animating out of Japan, I think, and so he literally flew on a plane with the reel of the movie, the original reel, sitting next to him on a plane from Japan back to America to bring it back to America, or like part of the movie on Baby's Kids. I was like, that was the weirdest story.
I love Bebe's Kids. I don't know how many of you, well, we're getting lots of people in the chat saying that they know Bebe's Kids, and it's awesome. So I'm glad you guys have seen it. Yeah, Bebe's Kids is available to stream right now if you have not seen it. I agree, it probably has not aged well. I watched it most recently, I guess just a couple months ago. I watched it actually on Netflix. And it's still entertaining. It's definitely a sign of the times. It's definitely very dated, but it's still entertaining. But that's a movie that was created by the Black community. Like the Bebe Kids story came from Robin Harris, who was a comedian, and it was as far as I know, I think there was something that a lot of Black people worked on, and also there were a lot of. I mean, it was like a movie that was made for the Black community. It wasn't made for the community at large.
Yeah,
it was very much. If you did not know his comedy or his Bebe Kid stories, which the Black community did already know before the movie came out, then you probably had no idea what this movie was.
Yeah.
So it was something that was very much geared towards the Black community, where I feel like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse definitely is reaching out to the Afro-Latino community with Miles Morales. But the character is already so well known outside of that movie because of comics that I think that it reaches out to much more than that. It's a movie for the world at large. It's kind of like if they had moved Static Shock from a television series into an animated movie, it would have been very successful, and it would have been something that was very much for the Black community, but also the world at large would have been a part of that. Just like Black Panther. Black Panther is an animated movie, but it would have been that same sort of synergy.
Yeah.
And it would have been great to see a Static Shock movie.
Hardliner asked, do you feel that the Arrowverse shows are diversified enough?
I'm sorry, I was reading the chat. Will you ask that again? What did he ask?
He said, do you feel that the Arrowverse shows are diversified enough?
I feel like I'm the wrong person to ask because I don't watch them religiously. I've seen some of them.
Yeah, me neither. I've not really watched
I don't know how diverse they are. I mean, I know that there are definitely Black characters in it. I know we have Batwoman, who's a lesbian. And there are, other characters in it. So I feel like
there's at least some representation.
There is at least some representation. I also don't want to get to a point where I'm saying these things are diverse enough. Like, I feel like we can always just be moving through the flow of diversity. Like, if we get a lot of people of color, then we can start having, other. We can start having people who are of other genders or other sexual orientations or people with disabilities. Like I feel like there's an ebb and flow to
like we shouldn't be trying to fill a
representation
quota
that we're getting.
We shouldn't be like, oh, okay, we got 2 brown people, 2 black people, okay, we're good to go.
Right, exactly.
It should just be, we see all kinds of people. Sometimes we DC, sometimes we don't, but it's all kind of flowing around everywhere. And
I also wanted, this brings up another point in that a lot of times when people talk about diversity, what they're actually thinking is, let's add a black character. And that's not diversity. Like, diversity is more than just black. And I know that I focus, this is my my gaze is that I'm black and queer, so oftentimes the things I talk about are black and queer, but it's more than just that. It's more, you know, if we have one black character, you still don't have, you know, Indian characters or Chinese characters or Latino characters, or we don't have women, or we don't have trans people, or we don't have people in wheelchairs, or we don't. So diversity is more than let's just add a black character.
Yeah.
It's not like Lisa Turtle on Saved by the Bell. That doesn't, you don't get a pass for just adding a black character. Manly Mutt says, yeah, diversity is adding an Asian character. Another thing, if we're going to talk about Asian characters also, another big thing about representation in animation is that a lot of, especially in America, a lot of Americans view anime as featuring white people, which is so weird to me. That's just such a weird thing to me. I just want to be blunt in saying anime and animation and Japanese animation is not geared towards white people. It's geared towards Japanese culture and the Japanese demographic that is in Japan. And just because you're watching it in America, it doesn't mean that those characters aren't Japanese. You don't assume. This came up a lot when ScarJo was cast in Ghost in the Shell, and a lot of people were saying, well, the character is white in the cartoon. I'm like, why would you think that? Why would you assume that a character who is steeped into Japanese politics and is set in a Japanese setting is white?
Yeah.
And has a Japanese name. Thank you, Dave. and a character that has a Japanese name, first and foremost, is white. It's just such a very strange thing that I've noticed a lot of people in America watching anime.
Yeah, they just see light skin. They're like, that's gotta be.
Right.
Guess what? Japanese people have light skin too. and dark skin sometimes too. It's all over the place, so it doesn't just represent one.
Right. Exactly.
So do you, let's talk about some good examples of what you think are good representation in like some movies that you think, or animated, you know, and some examples in animation do you think did a really good job about representation?
I think that Persepolis, have you guys seen that movie? It's a animated movie that's based on a graphic novel, which is an autobiographical graphic novel. I do not remember the name of the person, so I'm going to look it up real quick.
Yeah.
That it's created by. But I think that if you have not seen Persepolis, that is definitely a good animated film to watch, and that is very authentic. It's very, because obviously it's coming from this creator's specific point of view and experiences. So that is definitely one to watch. I cannot find the name of the creator. Google is failing me.
Marjane Satrapi, says Reed H. Cooper. He says Marjane Satrapi is her name. She's lovely.
Yeah, that's definitely a movie that works. That works. Like I said, Coco definitely works. I think that Moana is actually a good. Moana actually has great representation.
Yeah,
I love that. Disney actually went, because Disney did a little bit different with Frozen for their princesses, and that, you know, the idea of true love and what those princesses represent is different from what a lot of the other Disney princesses represent. And I think that they went even more in a good direction with Moana and showing a princess who is not stereotypical for Disney.
Yeah.
Someone who is able to. I think that entire movie, not just her being a princess, but that entire movie gets rid of some of the Disney tropes that we get often with their princess movies. I love that film had. I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it. I think you guys have all seen Moana by now. But I love that the actual climax of the movie is restoring love and peace to something. And it's very much a story of femininity and kind of like gosh, I don't know how to phrase it without giving away, but you've seen it, so you know what I'm trying to say. It's definitely, I mean, you talk often or have talked often about the differences between male stories and female stories. And Moana is definitely one of those female stories that's less about destruction and it's more about regenerating.
Yeah, creating, bringing the world together, like, making everything everything right. Yeah.
And so it Moana definitely plays into Polynesian culture and brings that into it, and how that kind of story is sort of represented in their mythology and folklore and culture. And I think that it is successful in that.
Yeah, and like Reed H. Cooper and Savage points out, I think all of the cast, or most of the cast, is all Polynesian voice actors, aside from Alan Tudyk, who voiced the chicken.
But it's a chicken.
It's a chicken. Yeah,
and it's Alan Tudyk.
Which is like trying to think of like another movie. I was thinking about Lilo and Stitch, which had a bunch of which is and Lilo was not voiced by a Hawaiian person, but I think some of the other actors were, and I think that was even earlier. Why didn't hit every single mark of like full representation and every voice actor? I think they did a pretty good job about allowing these people of color being the leads in the entire movie, which doesn't really happen.
I love that with the Moana voice cast, they even went out of their way to cast an unknown as the lead. That is unheard of for. I mean, it's something that maybe would have happened years ago, and not with a person of color. But to cast an unknown in a animated movie, obviously that in the history of animation, that was more of a thing years ago.
Yeah.
Now we always get celebrities, whether they're good voice actors or not.
Yeah.
We get celebrities who can sell the movie with their name, and Disney did good in hiring a Polynesian actress and singer who no one had heard of before to voice this character.
Yeah.
That was great.
That's great.
Some of the other things I didn't get because of everything going on in the world right now, and I did not get the Spark Short episode of Cinephilia up on YouTube this week. That is on me because Art actually did his job last week and uploaded stuff for me to format and get ready. So that's on me, but definitely check out our Spark Short episode if you guys haven't watched it, because Spark Shorts have been getting a lot of representation right. And I think that's kind of the way things are going. I think Pixar often leads in the way of story and that kind of thing. So Spark Shorts are good. Coco's good. Do you want to talk about Coco, Art, or have you talked about that enough?
No, we can talk about Coco. And I just wanted to make, speaking of Polynesian people, Manly Mutt makes an interesting point that his favorite sauce from Chick-fil-A is Polynesian. So I guess, that's important.
That's the best one.
Is it?
But yeah, let's talk about Coco. Coco, yeah, I think Coco was one of the ones that I think they've fully committed to try to represent as well as they could. There's a lot of movies that they do the representation by like bringing the people in, by writing the story. But in I think in Coco they went so far into like capturing, not only casting and telling a story surrounding these people, but in actually integrating the culture very heavily into the story.
Yeah.
They did a massive amount of research. There's a bunch of things in this movie that I keep finding or realizing, or little comments that people make, or the way that a certain thing looks, and everything felt so real to me. And I think Coco, by far to me, in the more recent things, has been one of the most impressive animations with representation in it.
Yeah, I think it's Coco is much more fully fledged and fleshed out than a lot of movies that we get that feature non-white people and cultures.
I mean, so much as to include, it's people who, if you weren't Mexican, you would never know who they were. There's a bunch of like hidden things in there, like a bunch of the Easter eggs are literally specifically for Mexican people. If you're not Mexican or are familiar with Mexican culture or pop culture stuff, you would never have any idea these things exist. But they're there, and then they took the time to kind of. And I think to me, the fact that they put details that not everyone would be aware of, I think made it more inclusive to show how hard they were trying to integrate as much of it in this movie as they could.
Yeah, I think that another movie I would say is pretty good at representation. Yeah, I would put Mulan on that list.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got its problems. It's not perfect. Like, I think that they kind of poke a little fun at the folklore that this story is taken from by adding this Mushu character and letting Eddie Murphy just be like a wisecracker. But other than that, I think that it really nails the culture and is a good representation for strong women as well. I was very excited for the Mulan remake. It was probably the live action remake I was most excited to see, specifically because it was taking out Mushu and the music, the songs, which are great songs in the movie, but I was excited to see Mulan taking a little bit more seriously and being a little bit more grounded. I mean, granted, I guess in the new one, there's also like an actual dragon. So there's still like an element of fantasy and myth to it. But I think Mulan overall is a really great movie that still,
particularly for the time. Like, if we make Mulan now, we would have more issues and would have to take a closer look at some of those issues that it didn't. But for a movie made in the 90s, but we were still working on things, it took some steps forward, I think, and to try to represent better. Reed Cooper says,
Reed H. Cooper says, yeah, Will is saying that Mulan was good for the culture, but is he allowed to say that? So that brings up a good point, is that, like I said, a lot of my a lot of things I talk about are because of my worldview being Black and queer. I am much more able to talk about Black and queer things because of my experience, and I don't ever want to be taken as the representative for anyone else's culture. So definitely, don't take me as the word of speaking on behalf of Chinese culture or Arab culture or anything like that. Definitely reach out to find film critics who are of that culture, because there are plenty everywhere, and listen to multiple voices. My word is not the last word. And that's something that we always talk about here on Cinephilia anyway, is that everyone brings in their own opinion and their own perspectives. I think it's very important when talking about representation and culture that people listen to the people who are of that culture that they're speaking about, to get the most authentic voice on what that take is.
Yeah.
So I'm actually glad you brought that up, Reed H. Cooper.
He just says, wait, aren't you talking about when I was talking about Coco? Wait, aren't you being inclusive by assuming that people can't understand a cultural or cultural reference without being in that culture? No.
Outclusive? I don't think I've ever actually heard that word.
No, because there are plenty of things that if you're not part of the culture, you're not going to know. And it's not saying that you can't know. We'll never know, but like not you specifically, but general populace won't know. There's a bunch of things in that movie, especially references to pop culture references to like the 50s and 60s of important Mexican actors and figures that existed in general populace here in America has no idea who those people are. And that's what I mean. Not saying you can't, not saying that you would not be available, but generally speaking, if you aren't part of the culture, whether naturally by being Mexican or just being a fan of the culture, there's unlikely that you would catch some of these things. I'm not saying you don't and you wouldn't. It's just unlikely because there are very specific details that were specifically put in there by Mexican people for Mexican people to almost give it. I can't think of the word. Just give it a little bit of validity in terms of some of those things. Yeah.
That's why I say, like, when I was talking about Bebe Kids, that Bebe Kids was specifically made for the culture. It's just like all of those little Easter eggs. It doesn't mean that people outside of the culture can't understand it or, get it on its broadest of terms. But there are definitely specific things that are made specifically for people of a certain culture in these movies to be acknowledged that this is for you. This is your culture, and you're going to get this more so than other people. For those of you that's just joining in, today's episode of Cinephilia, we're talking about representation and animation, the pros and the cons. There are lots of both. And we were just before that break, we were just talking about movies that are made for the culture, where people of the culture get little Easter eggs or have a little bit more of a welcome mat, I guess, to say, this movie is for you. I think that does not negate people not of the culture not being able to get into the movie. Like, they can still experience the movie and still take their morals or lessons or whatever from it. I think that it does. There's also this thing where cultures that are treated similarly in situations can see themselves in similar cultures. You know what I mean? Like if a movie is about oppression, then there are lots of different cultures that can get into that, even if the movie shows one kind of oppression. So there are still broad ways that everyone can see themselves in this movie. And that's another thing about representation is that getting more than just white stories doesn't mean that the audience can't get into it. I think we're as an audience, so conditioned to be able to see ourselves in white characters, whether we are white or not. But it doesn't work as easily the other way around, where a white person is seeing themselves in other characters, because a lot of white people aren't used to that. A lot of white people have no problem doing that, which is great. And I think that the more that we get representation in animation, where we get movies that are about different cultures and different non-white people, the more practice white people who do have a problem seeing themselves in other people, they'll get more practice, and it'll eventually get easier for them, I would hope. I mean, it's so easy for us to see ourselves in other people that I would hope that it wouldn't be that big of a problem, vice versa. But sometimes it seems to be.
And so tacking on to what you were saying about, I think a movie or TV show or anything like that kind of handles that universality, but still give you the target audience, the target story, but still give you enough universal understanding and universal story are the most successful ones. The ones that can give you a little bit of both. Because it often happens that if you watch a movie that is, you're not the audience for this movie, and they're not working well at being universal, then you don't connect with these movies. And it often less so now, but maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, a lot of foreign movies, sometimes you watch them and you're like, I can't connect with this because none of these events are towards my life. None of this cultural references mean anything to me. So sometimes we have a disconnect with foreign movies. And now has become more globalized. That's starting to become less and less. We get more universal stories. But I think
we're getting more foreign movies, and so we're getting more foreign history. And the more that we learn about other people, the better it is.
Yeah.
In general.
Reedish Cooper says, I'm hard tested to think of a proper queer representation in animation. Help me, Will. I feel like I learned and understood that life in spite of cartoons.
So queer representation in animation is awful.
Yeah.
I can give you one blatantly queer character in animation that I love. There are other queer characters in animation that are coded, and coding is another thing that I wanted to get into in this conversation, where characters are coded to be a certain way so that you get bits and pieces of hints that they are that way, but it's never blatantly said. And again, Savage Stalker OTHP brings up She-Ra, the new She-Ra on Netflix, which I actually have not watched yet, but I hear it's amazing. But like, television is a leader in
that,
all sorts of representation, more so than film. So television, you get She-Ra, or you get Steven Universe, which is a very queer show.
I just was saying, tweet Steven Universe is.
So those are good representations in television animation. But as far as film animation, the one character that I will tell you that I love, who is blatantly queer, is Mitch in Paranorman.
Yes.
And he's only blatantly queer because of one little throwaway line, but they put it in there and it's blatant. And he is not used as a token. He's not used as a marketing tool.
Yeah.
Like, the reason that Paranorman wasn't protested against by anti-LGBTQ people is because they didn't know about it until the movie was already out. Whereas Disney will say, we've got this queer character coming in this movie. We've got representation coming for you. And there's all these protesters out there who, are protesting it. And then we actually see it, and it's just like a kiss in the background, or like a character might just slightly fawn over another character of the same sex.
Yeah.
It's just like, was that even worth the protest? Was that even worth the marketing? Like,
worth putting in?
Give us some substance.
Yeah. Like it's such a throwaway. It's like, just don't put it in there. If you're not gonna do it,
it doesn't help. I mean, I love to see it, but I would love to see it like at the forefront of the movie. Like, instead of these two women kissing in the background
that was so infuriating.
Scene, give me Oscar Isaac and John Boyega just going at it the whole time.
They were down for it. It was gonna be happy. It was fine.
It would have been fun.
Fine.
But
it's Star Wars, so people are gonna come no matter what. You were still gonna make the money.
That's the thing. That should be the stepping stone. When you are secure enough to know that you're still going to make all the money in the world,
just put it in.
But you are worried that this one little thing is going to not go over well for you, then that's some bullshit.
It was the last movie in the trilogy. People are gonna come anyways. We should have just done it.
So this leads into the idea of coding I mentioned, where we get hints that people are, of a certain whatever it is they're trying to code, but we never explicitly get it. There are lots of coded queer characters in animation. Pleakley in Lilo and Stitch, for example.
Oh yeah.
He's just in drag the entire movie.
And he's loving it. He's having the blast.
He's loving it. And it's such a queer character, but it's also just like a background slapstick sidekick role. So we don't get the substance that, he actually is queer, or, the blatant reveal of it. It's just like, oh, he's in drag, but it's played for laughs.
Plus he's like an alien. So like, not really sure how they function in their world.
Right.
So
he's just in disguise on Earth, and the disguise that he loves just happens to be wigs and dresses, and he's fierce. But the problem with coded queer characters is that coded queer characters are often not just in animation, but since we're talking about an animation, most definitely in animation, queer coded characters are often the villains. So Jafar is also a very queer coded character. He's very opulent. He's got very expressive mannerisms that come off as very queer. He's very catty and shady. And oftentimes it's easy to code villains as queer because villains, two reasons. Villains are not the focus of the story, so they don't usually have a love interest. So it's easy for you to put queer things on them because you don't have to play it out in some sort of relationship and make it blatant. But also villains are usually seen as a little bit more fabulous and also a little bit more counterculture. Yeah. Like the villain is literally the counter to whatever the hero is in movies. And if the hero is someone that has to be liked by mainstream culture, then the villain is going to be the opposite of that. And mainstream culture often puts queer characters into marginalized and villainous roles.
Yeah.
So we get, I mean, there are countless characters in animation who are villains that read as queer. Jafar, especially just with Disney, we got Jafar, we've got Cruella de Vil, we've got Maleficent, who is very much statuesque lesbian. We've got Ursula, who is literally designed after a drag queen divine. And you know, honestly, these characters are my favorite characters. I've always been a fan of villains for this reason. But at the same time, it's kind of like fucked up
that's what they end up.
That queer oftentimes equals villain.
And they're cool characters.
What?
And they're cool characters, and we like them. But if that's all you're getting, then it's kind of moot. Rector Set says Jafar example spot on. He liked that example, and he also brought up Ursula Seawish as divine, the drag queen, much like Jafar.
So the other character that is very much queer coded because she doesn't get it's easier for her to be queer coded because she has not as of yet gotten a romantic relationship and is not a villain, although she was inspired by a villain. So it's still kind of the same thing. But Elsa in Frozen is very much a queer coded character. She's a character who is not comfortable in mainstream society, and she wants to be sort of being on her own and away from mainstream society is what makes her more comfortable and more powerful with herself.
Yeah.
And the first Frozen very much was kind of a universal. I mean, we talked earlier about things being universal, but also having that kind of coding for the culture within it too. Elsa is very much a universal character where you can put whatever kind of oppression you feel on her, and her Let It Go song. That's why that song became so popular, is because so many people felt it from so many different angles. But it very much was a huge, huge deal in the queer community that Elsa was kind of like, I'm getting out of this way people want me to be, and I'm feeling comfortable in myself, and I'm going to be authentic and amazing as myself as a queer character, as a queer person. That very much was a big deal. And the fact that we've now had 2 movies and a handful of shorts where she still has not gotten a love interest just plays into that. It's like, just introduce a woman for Elsa to fall in love with. Like, it would be amazing.
And I almost did it in Frozen 2. they like hinted. I was like, oh, it didn't happen.
Almost.
Again, they did that thing where they're like, we're gonna give you a little trickle of like hope, and then not do anything.
Savage Stalker OTHP says, was Void in Incredibles 2 only coded queer? I know everyone gloomed onto the idea that character being queer. I feel like I've only seen Incredibles 2 once, so I can't go into the specific details of it, but I definitely felt like that character was queer when I was watching it. So I'm going to say yes.
I don't remember who Void is.
That
guy. Yeah, that's right. The blue-haired girl.
Yeah. So she was
yeah, I could see that.
A new character for Incredibles 2. And again, there's so many characters sometimes that we don't get fleshed out. We don't get characters as fleshed out as we could. Mm-hmm. So we never even get a lot of the substance that would really dig into who these characters are. But there was definitely some queer coding with that character going on. I remember feeling that watching the movie. But coding can be a nice thing if you just want to be watching. If you end up watching a movie and you pick up on things and you can see yourself in characters, that's great. But coding is still not like the blatant, representation that we want. We still want characters who are blatantly who they are and acceptable as who they are. One thing about one movie that is very, very much coded, but is very weird to me, and it's a movie that I love. Do you guys remember the old film Osmosis Jones?
Yes.
Do you remember that? Uh-huh. So Osmosis Jones is very much coded in Black culture. Even with the casting, we've got Chris Rock and Brandy doing the main voices. But the movie is about germs inside of someone's body, and they're trying to help him heal and get better. And it's a great idea. And like I said, all of these movies, if we had more representation across the board, then none of these little things would be a problem because we would have other representation. But because these are the only movies that we have that represent, it's kind of a weird thing to me that we have characters who are very much Black coded, but are only seen as germs. This is another thing, like having Black characters that we don't actually see as Black.
Yeah.
They're germs. And then on top of that, they're actually germs inside of a white person. Because at the very beginning and end of the movie, there are these live action bookends to that movie where we see that I believe it's Chris Elliott is the actor who is actually has the problem going on that's causing these germs to get into formation to help him out. And he's a white guy. So all of this whole movie that's Black coded is actually happening inside of a white body, which is very, as a kid, you don't think about it.
Yeah.
But thinking back on it now and what we know now, it's very, very strange.
DKSB asks, what is coding? Do you want to explain real quick for those people who just showed up what you mean by coding?
Coding is when you create a character and display a character with hints of whatever it is that you're coding with. Like, for example, I was using Jafar as an example earlier. He's not a blatantly queer character, but because of the way he carries himself, the way that he plays out throughout the film, he's very much queer coded. Maybe it's easier if I use Osmosis Jones as an example, because Black coding in that movie means that they're using Black slang, they're dressed in Black like urban attire, the germs. And so you get this idea that they are Black, even though they look like blue little germs. They don't look like actual Black people. They're still speaking in very much Black vernacular, and presenting themselves as Black characters. So that's what coding is, even though you don't blatantly get an outright statement that this character is this. You get these little character embellishments that push that character into being that.
One of the this is not an animation, but one of the like I don't know if it's my favorite coding. I don't know. Was one.
I mean, sometimes it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Like you recognize
it's in the 1963 version of The Haunting, where the one girl is clearly lesbian and hitting on the other girl, but I didn't get it at first. I watched it in film class, and I was like, watched it, and then my teacher brought it up. He's like, "Here's the point. Think about it this way." And my brain went exploded. It's like, oh my god,
she's a lesbian character.
She's a lesbian character. She's just hitting on her.
Say it, but it's definitely in the dialogue and in the way. A lot of actors too, because a lot of actors know that their character is not blatantly gay, or that studios don't want to create characters who are blatantly gay. A lot of actors will actively act in a way that portrays it. So for example, also not animation, but this is a really good example. Nightmare on Elm Street 2, which is the gayest horror movie you will ever see. I guarantee you. Go watch it. It's amazing. Somehow the director and producer claim that they did not know they were making a gay film, but the movie is gay. Trust me. But Robert Englund, who's playing Freddy, caught it just from the script. He was like, "Oh, okay, so this is a gay movie. We're not blatantly saying it, but this is a movie about Freddy needing to embody this boy's body, this guy's body. He's not like a little boy." Whereas usually we get scream queens in horror movie. This movie had a male lead that had to fight Freddy, and so he's like the male scream queen. And there's a scene specifically where Freddy has to kind of like rough up this guy, and I can't remember specifically how it goes. Robert Englund approached the actor who was playing this guy that he has to rough up and said, "Do you want to play it this way?" And the guy was like, "Yeah," because that guy was also a queer actor. He was a gay actor, and they were trying to get him to play it straight for the movie. It's just like kind of not working. So Robert Englund was like, "Let's just lean into it. Let's play this scene as gay." And so there's this scene where in the movie where Robert Englund and the guy are Mark Patton is the name of the actor playing the guy. Robert Englund and Mark Patton are very close up. They're like face to face, like almost kissing. And Robert Englund is just delivering his lines that way. And they shot it that way, and they left it in the movie that way. And it's again a movie that has never explicitly within the film said these are gay characters, but the way that the actors play it and the way that it's written very much is coded that way. I mean, there's no denying it. You look at it and oh my God, this is some queer shit.
Yeah. Manly
It's the best movie. I love it.
Manly Lamont points out Eleanor in The Good Place. She never comes out as bi and is never addressed, but she very much hints it and makes comments throughout the entire series about, possibly even bisexual. And it's just kind of left there, and it's just without. So she's heavily coded into that.
Yeah,
and that was very much on purpose.
I think that it's easier to code something like queer identity because it's something that queer identity does not have a specific face. Black people are black, so it's not like. You can't take a black person and code them as another culture. That would just be weird.
Weird, yeah.
But then when you get into animation and you're creating things that are, well, I guess you could take a black person and code them as another culture because that's pretty much what the muses are in Hercules.
Yeah.
When I think about it.
Yeah.
So it's possible. In animation almost anything is possible. But it's a lot easier in animation to take something that is non-human, because that happens a lot of times in anthropomorphize it into being of a certain culture. And then, it's coded and it reads that way.
You know, the problem with being introverted is that we don't spend a lot of time talking, so we forget what words sound like sometimes. Happens to me is like, I know what it looks like when I read it, but when I have to say it, I'm like, how do you say this word? Because I don't talk a lot. So what is the word? I mean, I'm on streams a bunch live, but in real life, I don't talk a whole bunch.
Right. Yeah, that's a very true problem because I write a lot more than I talk for sure. And I'm thankful to have Dave behind me yelling at me how it's supposed to be, because that's how he just corrected me. A couple of other movies. I know we're already past our
That's okay.
usual endpoint, but
nobody
there are
after
a couple
us.
other movies that I wanted to hit on before we end it. Another thing, I guess this actually ties into coding in a way, although they are able to show skin tone with it, but you get characters like Mickey and Goofy and Donald who are animals that act as humans.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times those kind of characters get coded. Mm-hmm. I want to say that one of my favorite representations of Black culture in a Disney movie is actually Powerline in a Goofy movie.
Yes.
Voiced by Tevin Campbell, so he's got a Black voice. And see, Reed H. Cooper says Goofy is Black, right? That's the other joke, is that Goofy and Mickey and Minnie are actually Black but in whiteface. Like, I've heard that a couple times.
Oh no.
It's awful, but it's kind of funny. Because if you've ever seen
the naked, yes.
If you've ever seen those characters without their gloves or shoes on, their
black.
entire bodies are black, like the way that their arms are.
I mean, so they're technically, yes, they're Black.
Technically, yes. But then we get Powerline in a Goofy movie, who is also a dog and has brown skin, and is performing electronic urban R&B music. It's such a great character, and it's great that all of the characters except for Goofy, because Goofy's just worried about his relationship with his son, but all of the characters in that movie are inspired by Powerline. Like everything about that movie is about getting to meet Powerline, getting to be as cool as Powerline, and it's kind of interesting that a Black character is allowed to have so much power to like dictate so much. At the same time, I would be amiss to not point out the way that Black people are used as entertainment, and are treated well as entertainers and then kind of ignored otherwise, which is a lot of about what's happening in the world right now. How we aren't treating Black people the same way as everyone else. Not everyone else. We aren't treating non-white people the way we treat white people is what's happening in the world. So there's that play, you can read into it as well, but I feel like Powerline is such a nice, wholesome character.
Yeah, positive character.
To come out of Disney, and he's been getting a resurgence lately. He's showed up in a couple of the Disney mobile games lately, which is kind of cool, and he's got a huge fan base that's not just Black, but that character is definitely for the culture. I accept it.
DK Aspie says, I think some of the reason for making them subtly Black as opposed to like Black, fully, is that it's maybe easier to translate to international audiences. He said, I'm from Denmark. We don't have a large Black community, and especially they are not a separate culture here. So translations in animation mostly cannot maintain that identity.
I think that this is a tough one to parse.
Yeah. I see what you're saying, and it could be. I don't know if in this specific case, I don't know, but I kind of see the point, and I actually don't have a comment because I haven't explored that idea in my head before.
I understand. Well, it's just like
some other reasons for it. He says not all of it.
First and foremost, I think that American films should be representing America. And so I think that even as a foreign film, as an export from America, when you're watching an American film, you should be seeing the demographic of America.
Yeah.
No matter where you are.
Oh, yeah,
it's just like I was saying earlier, you don't watch an anime and expect it to be about white people.
Well, some people do.
Because you shouldn't.
You shouldn't be.
You shouldn't. Some people do. But you should expect film to reflect the film is an art form, and art should reflect the people who are making it, and the people who are of the place that it's being made. I think a big problem with animation and film in general also is that we don't get a lot of representation because there aren't a lot of people behind the camera who fit that demographic. I think that's why Coco was a step in the right direction, because they actually included people of the culture behind the camera creating that film. I think if we get more people behind the camera creating that film or creating films, then we'll start to get more of those stories in front of the camera.
And that's what happened with Coco. We talked about earlier about Coco. That's one of the things that happened is they literally went scooped up Latino people and dumped them off at Pixar and said, help us make this movie.
Yes. I think that even in Denmark, because I don't know how things go there, I've never been, but I think that even viewing movies in Denmark, the audience would be much more well-rounded to see diversity, to understand stories of different people. So I don't think that American-made movies. I understand what's being said, and that it's intentional in trying to
that universal thing we're talking
show
about
to a larger market. But I still feel like there's some responsibility that American-made filmmakers and production companies have to represent America.
Yeah,
that's why you're an American film.
Yeah,
and I do. It's weird. It's a different thing for America because America is made up of so many different types of people, whereas most countries aren't as like in Japan, we get Japanese movies because that's Japanese people are the majority of the country.
Well, and we're like physically a huge ass country, so we contain a lot of people as opposed to something like Europe, where the countries are much smaller. So the people who separate, their nationalities can separate a little bit better. Here, I mean, America, the United States might as well be a continent because we have so many different cultures all spread out across the land.
DK SB, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, says, I do think Disney tries to represent many cultures, though, and it makes sense to want to appeal as large an audience as possible to make more money. We do see diversity in all the grown-up movies, specifically animation, since it is targeted more to kids. It requires translation since they haven't learned English yet. Well, definitely the language definitely should be translated or to fit the audience that is getting there. But I think that the stories and the people who are leading the stories can still be diverse. I don't think that hinders the translation for understanding.
And Disney has more recently done a better job and done a better job of bringing those representation and that stuff forward, so that there's more representation, especially in the last 20 years.
We've been talking so much and we still haven't even hit some of the movies that I wanted to talk about, which is funny. So one other thing that I had a problem with The Princess and the Frog, this is going all the way back to the show. One other thing I had a problem with is that they were marketing this as, I think Disney's wording was actually first African-American princess, which would be true. But a lot of people took it as the first Black princess from Disney. And that's problematic because it totally disregards another Black Disney princess that had already existed.
This one.
Right down
here.
there. So I feel like Atlantis, The Lost Empire is such an underrated movie. I feel like Atlantis was a very good movie for the culture, for Black culture, that Disney, kind of shoehorned in under the radar. And it was one of those movies where, We've Got a Black Princess was not the marketing for this movie.
No.
It was a sci-fi movie that was not like what Disney was doing up until that point. Disney had specifically decided with Atlantis and with Treasure Planet that they wanted to do hard science fiction that did not have musical numbers that were taken more seriously. I mean, both of these movies tonally are very different from Disney movies, and I think that put a lot of Disney fans off from them because they didn't do as well. Unfortunately, they weren't critically acclaimed or huge box office hits. Yeah. But Atlantis was such a great movie, and I think it's highly underrated.
Yeah,
we get
very much so.
What'd you say?
It's very much so.
Yeah. So the movie, the reason why I say they shoehorned this in for Black culture, and I don't know if they did it specifically for Black culture. I highly doubt it, but it turned out to be good for Black culture, I think. But this movie is kind of a bait and switch in that you go in thinking you're getting just a sci-fi with a white character voiced by Michael J. Fox, and it's going to be like a fun adventure, and it's all of that. And then when you actually get to Atlantis, and they represent Atlantis as a Black culture that's been literally lost for centuries, and it's nothing but Black people who are living in kind of a utopia, but they're like segregated from the rest of the world, and these explorers come in and kind of disrupt everything. But at the same time, there are some things going on where the culture kind of needs help to survive. It's kind of just like a great social commentary.
Yeah.
Not that Black culture needs help to survive. We got that. We surviving. But just that there's this lost culture that doesn't get is just due and is kind of ignored by the world, except for this one guy who wants to find them. And then they I've always been upset that Kida has not been included as a Disney princess, but at the same time, I love the fact that just like Elsa and Anna in Frozen 2, if you count her, I love the fact that by the end of her movie, she isn't a princess anymore. She's actually been moved
upgraded.
Up to queen. She's actually become a queen. So Kida is actually a Disney queen, and I feel like I've always been like, Kida should be a Disney princess, but at the same time, I'm like, no, she's a queen. She doesn't need to go with those princesses. So if you've not seen Atlantis or have not seen it in a long time, definitely check it out. Yeah, Reed H. Cooper is asking, does Atlantis 2 cancel Atlantis? We don't talk about Atlantis 2. Atlantis 2 was awful. It does not cancel Atlantis. Right? Atlantis 2 was awful.
Meyer Lauren says, I hate that I've never seen Atlantis. I'm going to add it to my list. You should. It's a great movie.
It's a good movie. It's very highly underrated.
Manly Mutt asked earlier, do you think Betty Boop was black-coded? She always seemed to me. Because that's really old Disney? Or was she more racist?
She wasn't Disney. She wasn't
Disney, no.
I would not say Betty Boop was racist. I actually think that a lot of the Betty Boop cartoons, I mean, there is racism that steeps into a lot of those old black and white cartoons, regardless of where they come from. So there definitely is some element of it in some of the cartoons. But I actually do think that Betty Boop was kind of queer-coded. It's been rumored that she was inspired by a black performer of the time, but I think that rumors has been debunked. I don't know the specifics of it offhand. It's definitely something that I should research, or we should all research. But she definitely comes out of the jazz scene of the time, which was a black thing, a black scene. And there's also a few Betty Boop cartoons that feature Cab Calloway as well as characters. So there's a whole, Cab Calloway was a black jazz singer of the time. So there is a whole likening to blackness that happens with Betty Boop and her shorts, most definitely. What was, I don't know what I was going to say next. Another movie, I think this is the last movie that I most definitely want to bring up, although I have a lot of others that I could bring up.
Hi, Valen. How's it going?
What?
I was saying hello, Valen. Valen just shut up.
Hello. Another movie that I would be amiss not to bring up in this conversation is Pocahontas.
Yeah.
Which definitely has some problems. But at the same time, like, Pocahontas for me is a movie that would be great if it was not based on or inspired by a true story.
Yes.
If Pocahontas was pure fiction, I would absolutely love it.
Like, if it really happened the way it said it happened, great. But it's definitely not what happened.
Right. If Pocahontas was not based on history,
yeah,
and did not get all of that history wrong, then it would be great. But it definitely gets a lot of that history wrong. And what's really weird about, well, not weird because I understand pop culture, but what always happens with Disney is that when Disney tells its version of a story, any story, so whether it's like a historical event or whether it's from old literature, even if it's fiction, when Disney tells its version of a story, that becomes the most known version of a story. And so that is in itself the problem with Pocahontas, is that people take Disney movies verbatim, and if it's fiction, it's not that big of a deal. Like, you can enjoy Alice in Wonderland or Peter Pan for what it is, even though they're not exactly how the original play or novel were, but they're fantasy, so it's like whatever. But when you do that with a historical account of people of color, not just people of color, but when you do that specifically with the historical account of colonization and white people coming to America and destroying the land of Native peoples and indigenous peoples, then that becomes like a very bad problem. You cannot take Disney's Pocahontas at face value, because so much of it has changed.
Yeah.
Without the history intact, I feel like if Pocahontas was a fictional story, it probably would be one of my favorite Disney movies ever, because it's got beautiful animation, beautiful character designs, beautiful color theory. The color theory in that movie just astounds me every time I watch it. And it's got great timing. It's got these scenes that are much more serious than we usually get from Disney. So that Disney did try to take it a little more seriously, at least, but it's just that they got the facts all wrong.
Yeah.
And they did hire indigenous people to do voices in it as well, but then they also hired Mel Gibson. So it's like Pocahontas is definitely a pro-con movie, but the cons of it outweigh the pros.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I hate to say, but Pocahontas is not the movie you go to for Native representation. As beautiful as it is.
But you do include it in the conversation because it needs to be.
Yes, you do include it in the conversation. Reed H. Cooper says, Pocahontas is also made to be an adult, and she wasn't. Yes, and they had John Smith and Pocahontas be lovers, which wasn't a thing, but if it was, she was a kid. Yeah, there are a lot of weird things that were changed from Pocahontas. And then Disney had the audacity to do Pocahontas 2 Journey to a New World, where she goes to England. I mean, it's still inspired by historical events, but they get it all wrong. And I get why. I love Pocahontas as a character, again, outside of her relation to history. Like, I love having a native character, and what that character actually stands for in the movie is great. I just wish that they didn't ruin the history and telling it, because that then becomes the history that everyone looks to, because it's Disney.
Yeah, I wish they would have been able to do something that was about Native American people, but had been slightly more fictionalized, so they could concentrate on the themes and the celebration of the people. Yeah. Kind of like Moana did, and you know, they didn't hit for a specific place. They said Polynesian people, and we told a story within that culture, but didn't try to like take something that existed really and try to make it better or tell a story on it.
Yeah. So, representation in animation, there you have it. I mean, we haven't even gotten into disabilities, which are almost non-existent.
Yeah.
We always see able-bodied people in animation.
I get that one character in Onward. That was kind of cool. The big buff guy with the crutches. That was
cool. I did love him.
Yeah,
but
great.
you know who I want to bring up now that you brought up Onward. That they tried to. This is another movie where they tried to put in queer representation, and they had a character. At least this character did blatantly say that she had a same-sex partner, but that character is also a cop. So,
yeah,
didn't age too well. That one isn't. That one's not going to be for the record books.
Cool. So I think. As a good conversation. Red Room Green says, haven't been talking much because I'm doing work in my room, but listening and loving this entire conversation. Oh, thanks. Good. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us.
I have to say that I was hesitant to continue a show for today because of everything that's going on in the world. And I think that, well, in the world, but definitely in America and on our streets in America, because I think that the protests that are happening are important and I didn't want to be a distraction from them. But I am very happy and thankful that Perception gives me this little soapbox to stand on every week. So I'm using my soapbox to hopefully try to better the industry and better audiences into, you know, watching things that are and thinking about things that are important. So I'm glad that you guys enjoy this.
We're here. A big part of what we do at Perception Studio is to kind of provide a place for especially here where we have a conversation, have a healthy, positive conversation where you can disagree with us and it's totally fine. And also to provide a little bit of an escape and a little bit of distraction for those who need just some to calm, you know, collect themselves and think about something else for a minute because there's a lot of stuff going on.
But to also have that escape be responsible.
Yeah.
So, you know, we love conscious escapism here. So
you can turn off your brain for a little bit, but you have to be mindful that you still have to go back to that real world and handle that. But we're happy to provide a little bit of both, all of that here. And Regis Cooper, he said he wanted to ask us how we were doing. Good. We're doing fine. Things got a little rough here in my city. So last night was an interesting night. A lot of sounds. But thankfully, we're okay. My family's okay. My city got kind of beat up a little bit, and it sucked. But you know, we're moving on.
I have to say that I've been down for a long time about things in this country, and that seeing people stand up for themselves has actually invigorated and empowered me. So I'm actually feeling better now. I think that some things need to happen in order for us to progress into a better future. And I think that this is a very historic time. And while it's not a pretty time, I think that this is pushing conversations that need to happen to the forefront.
It was also very nice and lovely to see how quickly the community here in my city turned around to make some of the damages and stuff. All this morning, people all over the communities were cleaning up and gathered and, try to correct some of the roughness that happened. And so it was that was one of the positive things that I saw this week. So that also made me feel really happy because I went home. I went to bed a little iffy yesterday too. So that was very lovely to wake up to that and see that. Amber's raising her hand at me.
Do you have recommendations this week?
Are you from here? Are you from here? No, then get out. Stop looting.
Okay. Amber said she says she saw videos of our friend posted a video of people telling like people who are causing trouble to get out of here. Like, you're not from here. Like, yeah, trying to like get the people who are being stupid out. There's
been a lot of this is a whole nother topic.
We could do another whole hour and a half show on this.
There's been a lot of people going into areas that they're not from and taking advantage of the situation, which is awful. Yeah. These protests are for a reason, which is police brutality against Black and brown people, which is happening at an alarming rate and needs to change. And I think that when we get away from continuously speaking about that and just people taking advantage and coming in and making matters worse, it's not helpful.
No. But we personally are doing okay. And hopefully, like you said, step forward here. Let's do recommendations. I actually have a recommendation. Do you have a recommendation?
I've got a couple of recommendations, actually.
Okay, I'm gonna let you do your first then. And then I'll do mine and then you do another one.
Recommendations are geared towards what's happening in the world. And I know a lot of people are having a hard time understanding how it gets to this point, how it gets to protests and looting and rioting. And so there are two movies that I want you all to watch. If you've not seen them or if you've not seen them in a while, I want you to check out Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing. Mm-hmm. While you're watching that, just replace the theme of heat in that movie, because that movie is all about a hot summer. Replace the theme of heat with that movie with COVID-19, and you will understand quickly how things get to this point. Mm-hmm. when there's just like this collection of things happening in the world that just easily feed into, we need to make some change right now, and I'm upset because of a lot of things. That Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing very much shows that experience and how we get to such dramatic protests. The other movie that I want you all to watch, unfortunately, Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing is not streaming anywhere, but if you have the money, rent it. I think it's worth the money to rent. You can definitely rent it to watch it. The other movie to watch is streaming on Netflix, and it's 13th. It's the documentary by Ava DuVernay about the prison system, how prison now works as a modern day slave system. I'm not going to go into all the specifics, but just watch it, listen, and learn something if you don't already know about this information, because it's very important. So yeah, those are my recommendations. Also, if you want to help out with any of the protests, there is a list of bail funds that you can donate money to if you have the means to do so, to kind of help the people who are being arrested at protests. I can share that list with you guys if you want. Just ask me. I posted it on my Instagram, so it's also there.
Follow Will. Manuel says, by the way, yesterday marked the 99-year anniversary of Tulsa, Oklahoma race riots.
Yes. Also, yes. Yesterday was the anniversary of the Tulsa race riots, and also today, June 1st. We're now in June. What is June 2020 going to have in store for us? But we're now in June, which is Pride Month. And Pride is also a celebration of the Stonewall riots that happened 51 years ago. So protests and riots do serve a purpose. Please understand that what's happening right now is historic, and there's a reason for it.
Yeah. So yeah, I just put in Will's information there. His Twitter, his Patreon, his Etsy store, and his and Dave's Etsy store.
Thank you.
Oh, your Instagram isn't there, but it's the same, William O. Tyler, the same as Twitter, right?
Yes, I'm William O. Tyler everywhere.
Everywhere. Cool. And my recommendation is a slightly more lighthearted one.
That's why it's good. I went first.
So I've talked a bunch of times about Lock and Key here on this channel. It's one of my favorite graphic novels. Netflix just did the season 1 of their series, which was okay. I didn't hate it. It didn't suck. It was just, it was all right.
I think that if it had come out before their first season of Haunting of Hill House, it would have been more accessible. But after Haunting of Hill House, it just felt kind of flat.
Yeah, and so maybe season 2 will be better.
Yeah,
they didn't get. I think they're still doing a season, so we'll see. But I'm thankful that it didn't suck. Anyways, if you've never read Lock and Key, Humble Bundle for one more day, I think. Let me double check if it is for one. I think it's for one more day. Is doing a bunch of graphic novels, primarily Lock and Key. So with $1, you get the first 2 volumes, which is plus 3 more other novels, and for $8 you get 2 more of the Lock and Key plus like 5 other novels, and then for $15 you get the entire series. So it's definitely worth, and they're all digital, so if you've never read it and would like to read it, or if you saw the Netflix show and want to see what this is based on, this is a great way to do it, and it's a really good graphic novel, and I really enjoyed it. It's by Joe Hill, who is Stephen King's son.
Cool.
So check that out.
I also want to remind people that the We Are One Film Festival is on YouTube. If you missed me talking about it earlier, YouTube has gathered some films from a bunch of the film festivals like Tribeca and Sundance that aren't happening because of the pandemic. So you can watch a bunch of films for the next, I think, 5 days left. You can watch a bunch of those films on YouTube. Just search for We Are One, and it's all on their YouTube channel.
Cool. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining us. Check us out on social media, and we will cinephilia later. I did it, Will.